Hi, I'm Kara Pogreba. Welcome to Bright Hope Creations. Today I'm making a pumpkin stand scene, but I'm using parts of different stamps to do it. So this is Up and Away, and it's a balloon stamp, but I'm just going to use the bunny and the mouse that are inside the balloon. And then I'll use Sweets, which is a mama mouse with her two little ones, and I'm just going to ink up those two little mice. They're going to be in our scene. And these are all stamps illustrated by Stacy Yakula for Purple Onion Designs. Now I'm using Nutmeg. He's an owl, but I'm only going to use the leaves that he's fluttering about in. So I'm going to stamp that, and I'll stamp that several times because I want to use those leaves kind of all around my scene. Next is the cocoa stand, but I'm just going to use the stand, not the cocoa parts in there. So I will ink that up, but wipe away a little bit of where they overlap onto the stand so that I don't have those showing up when I cut away the rest of the cocoa. This is Three Little Pumpkins from Decor, Fall and Winter, and that's a stool from Milk Set. So I'll ink those up. I'm using Memento Tuxedo black ink on everything. I will be Copic coloring. Next I will stamp up the barrel from Fair Accessories and Gathered Pumpkins. We'll focus on the Copic coloring for this video, but what I wanted to show here on this cocoa stand is I already colored through one time. So I found my shadows with my lightest color, came in with my darker colors and blended them out. But now I'm coming back after all that's done and I'm going through the whole routine again. So this was my darkest, the E39, and I'm just darkening up all those areas in the deepest shadows. And what I found interesting about this, coming through a second time, is that it really changed up the look of this cocoa stand. It was a little bit flat before with the coloring, and I think that just the way it layers on itself, the Copic Markers, it really just brought a lot more interest to the stand once I went through a second time. So now I'm coming in with the lighter E37, kind of blending out some more of those shadows from the E39, but also bringing in the depth of shadows that were still too light. You can see where I wiped away the image up at the top inside the stand so that the cocoa parts would not sit on top of the stand. And I don't really go back in and fix that or put in any extra wood grain. Once I have the bunny and the mouse up there, because this is their pumpkin stand, but once I have them there, you really don't notice that the wood grain doesn't come all the way through. So next I'm going to go to the lighter color of the E33 and blend those shadows out into the main parts of the wood. And here's where it's funny, I really think that this added a lot of depth the second time I went through. So that's why I kept that for the video and didn't show you the entire beginning of it. This is Copic coloring can take time, and if you're interested, I think it's fun to watch, but it also can get a little tedious if you're just watching the same thing kind of over and over. So finishing that up with the E33, and then I colored this barrel with the same E30s and pretty much the same way, and then I just came in and put in some cool grays to show those rims. I'm coloring the stool, and I did this in the E20s, so I'm finding those shadows and I'll come in with my darkest color over those, which is a 27, to get those dark shadows. And I did the other ones, the wood barrel and the cocoa stand, in 30s, but I wanted to do this in a different combination of earth tones or wood so that it would show up, because it's going to be between those two. So now I'm just blending out those colors, the darker one into the light, and I will finish up with an E21. What's fun about Stacy Yakula's illustrations is I think they just all work so well together, and it's fun to create a scene, to see the different sizes of the animals and decide that will be in the forefront because it's a larger one, this will be in the back because it's a smaller one, or however to develop these scenes. Well, okay, so we're on to the pumpkins, and I found the shadows, and now I'm coming in with the YR18 to give it the dark shadow color. I will come in a little bit darker at the end, but now I'm going to blend it out with the YR04, and then I will lighten that even further, and this is a YR65. So kind of a different combination, but this seemed to work well for me. And I did all of these pumpkins the same way. So the gathered pumpkin stamp and also these pumpkins. And here you see the E07, and that's what I used for my darkest shadow. I stamped a couple of these images, and for one of them I cut out the front two pumpkins, and I'll use those individually in the scene. So again, selectively stamping, I guess, but this is selectively cutting. I'm just blending out again. So that was the YR18, this is the YR04, and we'll finish blending that out with the YR65. One way that I use, or a technique that I use to create scenes, is to have things stamped out on printer paper or just some cheaper cardstock and cut them out so that I can move them around to decide what looks good where and how to balance things out. So that really helps in the creative process of deciding what to put into a scene, because all of these images really did not seem to go together. There were animals in balloons and there were animals with cookies, so that's kind of how it all worked out for me. You see, I colored those leaves, but I wasn't going to spend a lot of time showing that because I really wanted to get on to the animals. And those two mice up above I colored already because this mouse is kind of the same. And that's where I'm just showing you how I colored them, really. So I colored them with my lightest to find the shadows, and I came in with a C3 to darken up those shadows for this mouse. And I'm just looking at it to see where those should be. Blending that into the body with the C2. And I wanted to get up above his nose line there and just bring in all of those shadows. And then we go on with the C1, bringing it more into the body. And then onto the C0. And he's starting to take shape now. I'm getting the C00, and that's what I'm gonna use to kind of feather out to the end, to the lightest areas. I'm going to come in, and his ear is going to be the R00, and we're we're on to this bunny, and I'm finding the shadows with the E40. And he's going to have areas that are this brown, and then he's going to have kind of a warm gray white area as well. So finding those shadows, creating kind of a shadow of where his snout would be out further. And this is always the way I start my coloring. I take that light color and find those shadows first. It's kind of a fail-safe way from making a mistake. If I don't like where that shadow is going, it doesn't matter because it will be my lightest color. So when I do go a different route, that will only be as the color that the whole animal would be anyway. So I hope that makes sense. But that's kind of my fail-safe way of finding these shadows with an image. So I came in with the darker E42, and then I decided it could go a little darker, so I went with the E43, and now I'll blend that out with the E41. Sometimes I'll skip a color in between, like the E42, because these are small images. So getting from the dark to the light, it doesn't need every single color to blend. It kind of needs to go quickly from dark to light. So here's E40, and that's the lightest of those of the E40 family. And so I'm just kind of blending that in. And I'm leaving these areas you can see on his face, around his mouth, and his little belly area. That's going to be where the white or the warm gray is going to be. But up here too, I just kind of want to blend that into white because that's where the sun is shining. So here's the W00. I'm going to get that out and blended and into the ears. And he'll have a little R00 in his ears as well. And I realized that I could get these blended into more of a natural color with the W0. And now I'm going by his mouth area and just kind of getting that in blended. And I thought, oh, these ears can get a little darker because really they're inside, so I get darker with that. So that's the E43. And then blend that in with that R00 a little bit as well. But you can see these two guys, they look like they could be selling something. They look like they're having fun in that balloon, but I could see them also in this pumpkin stand. Now everybody's getting a little pink in their cheeks. And I decided that now that I have this bunny next to the mouse, he can stand to get a little darker there. And when I cut them out, you can see his tail is kind of connected up by the bunny's cheek. So I keep that connected there. And you'll see how I kind of fix that in the scene. What I'm saying is I don't really want to cut so intricately that I'm just cutting that little tail. So I keep it connected so that it doesn't get kind of funny or distorted at all. All right, now I've blended this mouse back in. He's got a little more depth to him, a little darker. And now it's ready to put the card together. So I used a embossing folder on some Smokey gray cardstock and put that on some orange. And now here's where I get that tail to work. So I used a C5. I think this is a C or a 6. And I'm coloring around that tail because that's kind of the same color as the background. And so that's how I kind of work around that. And now it's just a matter of deciding where everything is going to go and gluing them down. And I'm using glue instead of a tape runner because I have this embossed background and I just thought that the glue would hold better. So that's one of those little pumpkins that was cut out of that trio of pumpkins. And here is the gathered pumpkins image. There's a trio. And now here's how our mice are working together to get a pumpkin up to those entrepreneurs. And we're going to put a few leaves in the scene. Here's that pumpkin that he wants. And the leaves, I just cut all of those out, but you can see there are places where I left some white. So I'm going through again with that Copic marker just to put in some gray so that it blends better in with the scene. I also will put a few of the smaller leaves over these clusters of leaves to hide some of that. And then it's just a matter of picking them up and putting a little glue down and gluing all of those down. And I'm coming in with that Copic marker and touching up just a few areas that it's a little white, and continue to glue down those little leaves. And then our scene is just about done, but I cut off their tails when I cut them, not with a carving knife, but I did cut them off, so I wanted to add those back in. So I stamped those on that one was stamped on that cocoa stand so that he has his tail, and then I glued him on. And now here I'm going to show you how I figure out where I'm going to put the stamps. So that's the little guy there, and I put it pretty close to where I think it's going to go. And then I take a piece of acetate and I make sure that it's right in the corner of the MISTI so that it doesn't move around. And then I ink that up and I can see it on the acetate, and I can move my card around behind it to get it positioned exactly where I want that tail. And then I'm just going to stamp the tail of that little guy on that back. And it's just a little detail, but, well, he needs his tail, right? So glued him on, get his little pumpkin, and then he's all set. So take this out, and then it needs a sentiment, and it needs something in that upper right-hand corner. So he's going to say thank you for his little pumpkin. And I used some Catherine Pooler ink and stamped that up. And then I cut a little white border around it like there is around the card itself, and just glued that down so that he can thank his salesman for his purchase. There we go. The card is finished. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye.